I was standing on my knees in the cold, damp mud of our backyard, my fingers desperately clawing at the dirt, trying to scoop up the gray, gritty remains of my mother's ashes while my two stepbrothers, Chad and Brody, stood over me with their high-definition cameras, laughing so hard they were gasping for air and shouting into their microphones about how this was the most insane viral prank they had ever pulled. They hadn't just dumped the urn. They had waited until I was home, lured me outside with a fake emergency, and then recorded the exact moment my heart shattered into a million pieces as they tossed my mother's final remains into the wind like they were nothing more than common dust. All for the sake of their growing YouTube channel and a few thousand likes from strangers. I want you to look at me, listen to my voice, and tell me honestly. If the two people who were supposed to be your family treated your greatest tragedy like a punchline, would you be able to stay sane? Or would you do exactly what I did and decide that if they wanted to play games with people's lives, you were going to make sure they lost everything they ever cared about? Because by the time I was finished with them, their channel was gone, their reputations were in the gutter, and their mother was facing a decade in prison. And yet, my father still has the nerve to tell me that I'm the one who went too far. My story actually begins 5 years ago, when my world first started to crumble after my mother passed away from a sudden illness that left me and my father drifting in a sea of grief. But while I was drowning, my father was looking for a life raft, and he found it in the form of Linda. Linda was a lifestyle coach, who appeared in our lives like a polished, perfect angel, and she brought along her twin sons, Chad and Brody, who were exactly my age and seemed, at least on the surface, to be the brothers I never had. But the moment the wedding rings were on and the papers were signed, the mask slipped, and I realized that I hadn't gained a family. I had been moved into a den of predators. My father is a successful developer, a man with more money than time, and Linda saw him as a golden ticket, while her son saw our massive estate as the perfect backdrop for their budding prank channel. It started with small things that they called harmless fun, like putting industrial-strength glue on my toilet seat or filling my shoes with shaving cream. And every time I went to my father to complain about the constant harassment, Linda would be right there, rubbing his shoulders and whispering about how the boys were just bonding, and how I needed to stop being so emotionally fragile. My father, desperate to maintain the illusion of his perfect new family, chose to believe her every single time, telling me to man up and learn to take a joke, effectively giving Chad and Brody a license to torture me without any fear of consequences. Over the next few years, the pranks evolved from annoying to psychological warfare. They would record me while I was sleeping and post it online. They would accidentally delete my college applications from the family computer. And they once even convinced a girl I liked to go on a fake date with me just so they could film me getting rejected in the middle of a crowded restaurant. I became a ghost in my own home, locking myself in my room, which I had to reinforce with a heavy-duty bolt because they kept breaking in to steal my things for challenge videos. My only sanctuary was a small wooden box on my nightstand that held my mother's ashes and a silver locket with her picture. The only things I had left of the person who actually loved me. I worked 3 jobs just to save up enough money to move out the second I graduated. But the twins knew I was planning my escape, and they couldn't let their favorite target leave without one final grand finale. That brings us to that horrific night when I came home to find my room ransacked, and the urn missing. I ran into the backyard, heart pounding against my ribs, and saw them standing by the pool, their tripods set up and their ring lights glowing like demonic halos in the dark. They told me they were setting her free, and giving me closure. And before I could reach them, they unscrewed the lid and scattered my mother into the dirt and the pool water, cackling as I collapsed to the ground in a state of pure, unadulterated shock. They didn't stop filming even when I started hyperventilating. They just zoomed in on my face, mocking my tears and telling their fans to hit the subscribe button for more savage content. In that moment, the grief I had been carrying for 5 years didn't just disappear. It transformed into a cold, sharp, and surgical rage that cleared my head like a lightning bolt. I didn't scream, I didn't hit them, and I didn't even look at them again. I just stood up, wiped the mud from my hands, and walked back into the house with a clarity I had never felt before. So that's where things stood. My mother's memory had been desecrated. My father was asleep in his room, oblivious to the crime committed in his own backyard, and my tormentors were celebrating their big win over a bottle of stolen champagne. Before I tell you the details of the absolute destruction I visited upon them, I need you to pause and go to the comments section right now. Tell me, if you were pushed to your absolute breaking point and had the power to ruin the people who hurt you, would you take it, or would you walk away? I want to know if you think there's a limit to how much a person should have to endure before they are allowed to strike back. Because what I did next wasn't just a prank back, it was a total systematic liquidation of their lives. I knew things about Linda and her sons that my father refused to see, because I had been watching them from the shadows for years. I knew that Linda wasn't just a lifestyle coach. She was a serial scammer who had been systematically embezzling money from my father's business accounts by creating shell companies for consulting fees that went straight into a secret offshore account she shared with her ex-husband. I also knew that Chad and Brody's viral success was built on a foundation of lies. They used bot farms to inflate their views, and more importantly, they had folders on their shared drive of deleted scenes that showed them committing actual crimes, including animal cruelty and staging dangerous stunts that put innocent people at risk. That night, while the house was silent, I didn't sleep. I became a ghost in the machine. I spent hours bypassing the pathetic security on their computers, which was easy since I'd watched them type their passwords a dozen times, and I began to download everything. I took every bank statement, every incriminating video, every deleted chat where Linda laughed about bleeding my father dry before she planned to leave him for her real lover in Europe. I didn't just want them in trouble, I wanted them erased. The next morning, I acted like a broken man, staying in my room and refusing to eat, which only made them more arrogant and boastful at the breakfast table. Little did they know, I had already sent an anonymous tip to the IRS and the FBI's Financial Crimes Division with a neat, organized folder of Linda's embezzlement records. But for the twins, I wanted a more public execution. I waited until they were about to go live for their biggest stream of the year. A 24-hour charity event where they were supposed to be raising money for mental health, the irony of which nearly made me vomit. Using a remote access Trojan I'd installed, I took control of their broadcast 10 minutes in. Instead of their fake, smiling faces, the millions of viewers were greeted with a montage of their deleted scenes. The videos of them laughing while they dumped my mother's ashes, the footage of them kicking a stray dog behind a dumpster, and the recordings of them mocking their own fans for being stupid enough to send us money. The chat went from, "I love you guys," to pure, unbridled hatred in a matter of seconds. Their sponsors began dropping like flies in real time, and their subscriber count started plummeting by the thousands every minute. As they scrambled to figure out why they couldn't shut down the stream, the front door of our mansion was kicked in by federal agents. They weren't there for the pranks, they were there for Linda. I walked down the stairs just as the handcuffs were being slapped onto Linda's wrists, her screams of "This is a mistake" echoing through the marble foyer. My father stood there, looking like a man who had just seen a ghost, as the agents explained that his wife had stolen over $4 million from his firm over the last 3 years. I walked over to Chad and Brody, who were white as sheets, watching their entire digital empire burn to the ground on their own monitors. I leaned in and whispered, "It's just a prank, bros," before handing the police a thumb drive containing the unedited footage of them desecrating a human remain, which is a felony in our state. The aftermath was a bloodbath. Linda is currently serving an 8-year sentence for wire fraud and embezzlement, and Chad and Brody were sentenced to 2 years of probation and 500 hours of community service. But more importantly, they are permanently banned from every major social media platform, and are known worldwide as the most hated twins on the internet. My father tried to apologize, crying about how he should have listened to me, but I realized that his silence was just as much a betrayal as their actions, so I took my inheritance, the portion my mother had set aside for me that Linda hadn't been able to touch, and I moved 3 states away. I used the money to build a memorial garden for my mother, a place of actual peace where no one can ever hurt her memory again. I lost a father and a home, but I gained my freedom and the knowledge that I am no longer anyone's victim. I look back on that night in the mud and I don't feel sadness anymore. I feel a strange sense of justice. People like to say that living well is the best revenge, but sometimes, you have to burn down the old world to build a new one. If you're out there and you're being bullied or treated like a joke by the people who are supposed to love you, just remember that you have more power than you think, and sometimes, The best way to stop a monster is to show them you can be a much bigger one if they push you too far. If you're on my side and think I did the right thing by taking them down, please like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story of real-world justice. I want to hear your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments. Was I too cold? Or did they get exactly what they deserved? I'll be reading every single one of your responses. I'll see you all in the next story.